My mother leaned close and whispered, "You know that money should go back to this family." My father muttered under his breath, "You didn't earn a dime of it." I gripped the edge of the table as their lawyer stood and said clearly, "Your Honor, she manipulated an elderly woman." The judge reached for my grandmother's sealed will. I thought to myself, they really believe they've already won. My name is Harper Collins, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a hospice nurse, the one in the family who stayed close to home, who showed up to appointments, who answered late-night calls when Grandma needed help at 2 in the morning. I've been doing this work for almost 12 years now, and it's never been about the paycheck. It's about being there when people need you most, in those final days when every moment counts. Growing up, my older brother was always the favorite, the one they praised at every holiday dinner, every family gathering, every single opportunity they got. His name was thrown around like confetti. "Did you hear what he accomplished? Did you see his new promotion? Isn't he just amazing?" Meanwhile, I was called too sensitive, too soft, too emotional. When I cried at movies, they rolled their eyes. When I wanted to talk about feelings, they changed the subject. When I chose nursing school instead of business school like my brother, my father actually laughed and said, "Well, at least someone will be able to take care of us when we're old." I had a quiet dream I'd never told most people about. I wanted to open a small care home one day for elderly people who didn't have family, who'd been forgotten or left behind. I'd been saving for years, working double shifts when I could, picking up extra weekends, skipping vacations. Every dollar went into that dream. My relationship with Grandma was different than anyone else's in the family. I visited every single week without fail. Rain, snow, exhaustion didn't matter. Tuesday evenings were our time. I ran her errands when her knees got too bad to walk through the grocery store. I picked up her prescriptions, organized her medications, made sure she ate proper meals. I sat with her when no one else came, which was most of the time, honestly. We'd watch old movies together, the black and white ones she loved. She'd tell me stories about her childhood, about meeting my grandfather, about raising my father. Sometimes we didn't even talk. We just sat together in comfortable silence while she knitted and I read. I always hoped that if I just loved them well enough, my parents, my brother, if I just kept showing up and being kind and helpful, they'd finally see me for who I was. They'd finally understand that I mattered too. I wasn't rich or glamorous like my brother with his fancy corporate job and his expensive suits and his luxury apartment downtown. But I had something they didn't expect. I had a relationship with Grandma that was real, that was built on years of actual presence, not just obligatory holiday visits. The inheritance wasn't about greed. It was never about greed. It was about being seen, chosen, and trusted by the one person who truly knew my heart, who understood what I was trying to build, who believed in my dream when nobody else did. If you've ever been overlooked in your own family, this story is for you. You know exactly how it feels when the loudest person in the room gets all the praise while you're in the background doing the actual work, the hard work, the work that nobody notices or appreciates. You've been the quiet caregiver while someone else gets celebrated for showing up once a year with a store-bought pie and a big smile. You know what it's like to give everything and get nothing in return except criticism and dismissal. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been treated like you were invisible, hit that subscribe button right now because this community is for you. Have you ever been treated like you didn't matter until money showed up? Have you ever watched people who ignored you suddenly become very interested when there was something to gain? Drop a comment below because I want to hear your story. I want to know I'm not alone in this, and I want you to know you're not alone either. Click that like button if you believe kindness isn't weakness, if you believe showing up matters, if you believe that love is worth something even when it's not returned. This community is for people who were never the favorite but kept showing up anyway. We see you here. Your efforts matter. Your love matters. You matter. Grandma passed peacefully on a Tuesday morning in early spring. April 17th, to be exact. I was there holding her hand when she took her last breath. The hospice room smelled like lavender from the diffuser I'd brought weeks earlier. Sunlight came through the window in soft streams. She looked at me one last time, squeezed my hand weakly, and whispered, "You're going to do beautiful things, sweetheart." Then she was gone. I sat there for almost an hour just holding her hand, crying quietly, feeling like I'd lost the only person who'd ever really understood me. At the small family gathering afterward, My parents assumed everything would go to my father and then eventually to my brother. That's how it always worked in our family. The oldest son got everything. That was the tradition, the expectation, the way things were supposed to be. My mother was already talking about what they'd do with the house, whether they'd sell it or rent it out. My brother was calculating numbers on his phone, probably figuring out his share. Nobody asked me how I was doing. Nobody acknowledged that I'd been the one there at the end, that I'd spent the last 6 months of her life making sure she was comfortable and cared for. The will reading happened 3 days later in Mr. Harlan's office downtown. It was a small room with dark wood paneling and old law books lining the shelves. We all sat around a conference table. Mr. Harlan was an elderly man himself, probably in his mid-70s, with white hair and kind eyes behind thick glasses. He'd known our family for decades. He opened the folder slowly, carefully, and began to read. Most of it was standard stuff, small items going to various family members. Then he got to the main estate. To my granddaughter Harper Collins, I leave the entirety of my financial estate, totaling approximately $320,000, along with my personal effects and the contents of my home. Complete silence filled the room. You could have heard a pin drop. My mother's face hardened like stone, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. My father's eyes went wide, then narrow. My brother muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear. She must have guilted Grandma into this. There's no other explanation. The tension erupted right there in public, in front of Mr. Harlan, in front of everyone. My mother's voice got shrill. "This is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. Harper, what did you do? What did you say to her?" I tried to speak, but she cut me off. "You were always there, always in her ear, always poisoning her against us." My father joined in. "You took advantage of a sick old woman. You should be ashamed." I felt my face get hot, felt tears starting to form, but I forced them back. "I didn't do anything except love her," I said quietly. "That's a lie," my brother said flatly. "You manipulated her. You isolated her from the rest of us." "She was never isolated," I said, my voice shaking. "You could have visited any time. The door was always open." My parents accused me of deliberately keeping Grandma away from the family, of scheduling my visits when they couldn't come, of influencing her while she was sick and vulnerable, and not thinking clearly. They painted me as some kind of scheming villain who'd spent years plotting to steal their inheritance. It didn't matter that I genuinely loved her. It didn't matter that I'd sacrificed my time and energy. None of that mattered anymore. A few weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon, I was served court papers at my apartment. A process server knocked on my door, handed me a manila envelope, and walked away. My hands shook as I opened it. They were contesting the will, claiming undue influence and manipulation, arguing that Grandma hadn't been of sound mind, that I'd coerced her into changing her estate plans. I read through the legal language, the cold accusations typed out in formal terms, and I felt sick to my stomach. This was really happening. My own family was taking me to court. The next few weeks were brutal. My mother told relatives at a family gathering that I had played nurse just to steal from a dying woman. She said it loud enough for half the room to hear. People I'd known my entire life started looking at me differently. Extended family members started avoiding me at church. I'd walk into a room and conversations would stop. I'd try to say hello and get cold responses. I heard whispers behind my back at family events, saw the looks, felt the judgment. My cousin Rachel, who I'd been close to growing up, actually crossed the street to avoid talking to me. That hurt more than I expected. I realized in that moment just how deep this went. This wasn't about money at all. It was about control. It was about my parents maintaining their narrative, their version of reality where they were the good people and I was the ungrateful child. It was about punishing me for stepping out of my assigned role. The court filings hit me like a physical blow. I read through them alone in my apartment late at night, and some of the things they said about me were devastating. The documents included statements from my own father questioning my character, calling me calculating and opportunistic, suggesting I'd always been jealous of my brother and had found a way to get back at the family. He wrote that I'd been unusually attentive to my grandmother in her final years, implying that normal people don't spend that much time with their elderly relatives unless they want something. He questioned my motives, my integrity, my basic decency as a human being. Reading my own father's words describing me as manipulative and greedy broke something inside me. My brother posted vague comments on social media about family betrayal and people showing their true colors. "Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most," he wrote. "Blood doesn't always mean loyalty." His friends commented with sympathy, telling him how sorry they were that he was going through this. Nobody knew the full story. Nobody asked for my side. I was forced to defend my integrity publicly to people who'd known me my entire life, people who should have known better, people who should have known I wasn't capable of what they were accusing me of. Then came the exclusion, which somehow hurt even more than the accusations. October rolled around and my mother called me. I actually felt hopeful for a second when I saw her name on my phone. Maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe she wanted to talk this through. "Harper, we've decided it's best if you don't come to Thanksgiving this year," she said without preamble. "What?" I asked, not quite believing what I was hearing. "Just until the legal mess is over," she said, her tone clipped and cold. "It would be too uncomfortable for everyone. Mom, it's Thanksgiving, it's family." "Well, you should have thought about that before you decided to tear this family apart," she said and hung up. I stood there holding my phone, staring at it, feeling like I'd been slapped. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. Even when things were hard, even when I felt invisible, we'd all been together. Now I wasn't even welcome at the table. A week later, my parents attempted a private negotiation. My father called and asked me to meet them at a coffee shop downtown. I went hoping maybe we could finally talk like adults, like family. They were already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table. My mother didn't smile. My father slid a document across the table before I'd even sat down. "Sign it over and we'll forget this ever happened," he said simply. I picked up the paper. It was a waiver, a legal form agreeing to forfeit the inheritance and distribute it according to what they considered proper. "You can't be serious," I said. "We're very serious," my mother said. "This isn't about the money, Harper. This is about doing the right thing." "The right thing," I repeated. "Grandma made her choice. She knew what she was doing." "She was confused," my father said. "She didn't understand what she was signing." "That's not true and you know it," I said, my voice rising slightly. "Sign the paper," my mother said. "We're giving you a chance to fix this, to make things right, to restore family order." "Family order," I repeated bitterly. "You mean make sure everything goes the way you want it to go?" "We mean get things back to normal," my father said. "Normal?" I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and unfamiliar. When was anything ever normal? When was I ever treated like I mattered? I pushed the paper back across the table. "I'm not signing anything." I stood up and walked out, my hands shaking but my decision clear. The deepest betrayal came when they claimed in court that Grandma wasn't mentally competent during her final months, despite clear medical records showing otherwise. They submitted a claim saying she'd been experiencing dementia, confusion, memory loss, that she didn't know what she was signing or who she was leaving her money to. My father's lawyer implied during a preliminary hearing that I had exaggerated her condition to stay close to her, to gain her trust unfairly, to position myself as the primary caregiver when she didn't really need that level of care. "Ms. Collins presented herself as indispensable," the lawyer argued. "She created a dependency that didn't need to exist." I sat there listening to them twist everything, watching them rewrite history, and I felt my foundation shaking. I started doubting myself emotionally, late at night when I couldn't sleep, wondering if maybe I had done something wrong without realizing it. Maybe I had been too present. Maybe I should have backed off more. Maybe I had unconsciously influenced her. But then I'd remember her face, her smile, the way she'd hug me when I arrived for our Tuesday visits. I'd remember the conversations we had, deep and real and full of love. And I knew the truth. I didn't break under the pressure, even though it felt like it was crushing me. I began seeing the pattern clearly for the first time in my life. They had never valued me as a person. They had never seen me. They only cared about control and maintaining their image, their story, their version of how things should be. I was supposed to be the quiet one, the helper, the one who faded into the background. I wasn't supposed to be chosen. I wasn't supposed to matter. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that I had documentation from every single appointment, every visit, every conversation with Grandma's doctors. I had carefully kept hospice notes because that's what good nurses do. We document everything. Every medication change, every symptom, every conversation about care preferences. I had communication logs, text messages, emails. I had a calendar showing my visits going back years. I had photographs of us together, time-stamped and dated. I had a plan they never saw coming, though I didn't think of it that way at the time. I'd just been doing my job, being thorough, being present. Grandma had spoken to someone else about her intentions months before she passed, something I discovered later. She'd had a long conversation with Mr. Harlan about exactly why she was making this choice, and he documented every word. There was also a sealed envelope Grandma had insisted be included with the official will, and nobody except her lawyer knew what was inside. He'd mentioned it briefly during the initial reading but hadn't opened it. "To be presented if the will is contested," he'd said. At the time, I didn't understand why she'd done that. Now I understood perfectly. She'd known this might happen. She'd known her son, my father, well enough to predict his reaction. She'd protected me in advance. I wasn't completely alone in this fight, though there were many days when it felt like I was. An old family lawyer named Mr. Harlan had drafted Grandma's will. He was the same attorney who'd handled family matters for decades, who'd been there for births and deaths and everything in between. He'd known my father since my father was a child. He'd known Grandma for over 40 years. After the initial will reading, when everything exploded, he had pulled my parents aside privately and warned them. I found out about this later from his assistant. He told them not to contest the will unless they were absolutely sure about their claims, unless they had real evidence of wrongdoing. "You're making a mistake," he'd said. They'd ignored him. They assumed he was just being overly cautious, covering himself legally. They didn't realize he was trying to protect them from themselves. One afternoon, about a month into the legal proceedings, Mr. Harlan called and asked me to come to his office. I sat across from him in that same wood-paneled room. He looked tired, older than he had at the reading. "Your grandmother was very clear about what she wanted," he told me gently. "I need you to know that. She came to me 2 years ago, sat in that very chair you're sitting in now, and told me exactly what she wanted to do and why." He explained something I hadn't known, something that made tears start flowing down my face. Grandma had recorded a video statement. She'd done it at Mr. Harlan's office with a notary present, with witnesses. With everything properly documented, she'd wanted to make sure there was no question about her mental state or her intentions. "She knew this might happen," Mr. Harlan said softly. "She told me, 'My son won't understand. He'll fight this, but Harper deserves this. She's earned it not through manipulation but through love.'" Those were her exact words. Meanwhile, my family grew more arrogant as the court date approached. They seemed convinced they were going to win. My brother posted about justice being served soon. My mother told relatives that the whole thing would be resolved shortly, and I'd have to face consequences for what I'd done. They assumed courts would naturally favor immediate heirs over a grandchild, that judges would see through what they called my manipulation, that truth would prevail. Their version of truth. My father's lawyer seemed confident in the preliminary hearings. He strutted around making arguments about family rights and traditional inheritance customs and the vulnerability of elderly people. The tension built steadily as we approached the final court date where the full will and all attachments would be reviewed by the judge. I barely slept the night before. I kept thinking about worst-case scenarios, about losing everything, about being branded publicly as someone who'd taken advantage of a dying woman. I thought about my dream of opening a care home and watching it disappear. But more than the money, I thought about my name, my reputation, my sense of self. If I lost this case, if the judge sided with them, it would confirm everything they'd always believed about me. That I didn't matter, that I wasn't chosen, that I was forgettable. The courtroom was cold and formal, all dark wood and fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable chairs. My parents sat on one side with their lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit who looked confident and prepared. They looked confident, too. My mother wore a dark dress and pearls. My father wore his best suit. My brother sat behind them, arms crossed, expression hard. I sat on the other side with Mr. Harlan, who looked calm despite everything. I felt sick to my stomach. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them. The judge was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses that she kept adjusting. She reviewed the initial filings in silence while we all waited. The room was so quiet I could hear people breathing. Then she spoke. "I've reviewed the initial claims," she said, her voice even and professional. "The petitioners allege undue influence and mental incapacity." "Mr. Harlan, I understand there are additional materials attached to the original will." "Yes, Your Honor," Mr. Harlan said, standing. "The deceased included a video affidavit to be viewed in the event the will was contested." "Let's see it," the judge said. Mr. Harlan set up a laptop and projector. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The screen flickered to life, and there she was, Grandma, sitting in her favorite chair, the blue one with the floral pattern. She was wearing her purple cardigan. The video was dated almost 2 years before her death. She looked directly at the camera, and I could see in her eyes that she was completely present, completely aware. "My name is Margaret Louise Collins," she began, her voice strong and clear, no trembling, no confusion. "I'm 78 years old, and I'm of sound mind and body. I'm making this statement to clarify my intentions regarding my estate." She paused, adjusted herself in the chair. "I'm leaving the majority of my estate to my granddaughter Harper because she's the only one who stayed. Not because she was obligated to. Not because she wanted something from me, but because she loved me." I felt tears starting, but I blinked them back. "My son, I love you, but you visited 4 times in the last 2 years. 4 times. My grandson came twice, both times asking if I needed anything, by which he meant was I doing okay financially. Harper came every single week. She ran my errands. She took me to doctor appointments. She sat with me when I was scared. She held my hand when I was in pain. She made me laugh. She listened to my stories even though she'd heard them 100 times before." Grandma looked directly into the camera with an intensity that made it feel like she was looking right at us in that courtroom. "This decision is deliberate. I know exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I've discussed this at length with my attorney, Mr. Harlan, who has known me for over 40 years. I've had multiple conversations with my doctor, Dr. Patricia Stevens, who can confirm my mental capacity. I am not being manipulated. I am not confused. I am making a choice based on years of experience and observation." She addressed my parents directly then, and the room got even quieter somehow. "I know this will hurt you. I know you'll feel angry and betrayed. But ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you called just to talk? When was the last time you visited without wanting something? When was the last time you treated Harper like she mattered?" My mother's face had gone pale. My father stared at the screen. "Harper matters," Grandma continued. "She has always mattered. She has a dream of opening a care home for elderly people who don't have family support. She's been saving for years, working herself to exhaustion. This money will help her make that dream real. It will help her help others the way she helped me. That's worth more to me than maintaining tradition or following expectations." The video continued for another few minutes with Grandma explaining specific details, discussing her relationship with each family member, making it absolutely clear that this was her choice, made freely and deliberately. When the video ended, the judge sat back in her chair. She looked at the medical documentation that Mr. Harlan had submitted. Reports from Dr. Stevens confirming Grandma's full mental capacity at the time the will was drafted and signed. Cognitive assessments. Written statements from medical professionals who'd interacted with her regularly. The judge reviewed everything carefully, taking her time, making notes. Then she looked up at my parents' lawyer. "Does your client have any medical evidence to support claims of mental incapacity?" she asked. "We have testimony from family members about observed confusion," the lawyer said, but his confidence had evaporated. "Family member observations versus multiple medical professional assessments," the judge said dryly. "Mr. Harlan, does the deceased's medical team support the claims of confusion or dementia?" "No, Your Honor," Mr. Harlan said. All medical professionals involved in Mrs. Collins' care confirm she remained mentally sharp until very near the end. The documentation is comprehensive. The judge made a few more notes, then looked directly at my parents. "The court finds no evidence of undue influence or mental incapacity. The will is valid and will stand as written. Furthermore, I'm concerned about the nature of this challenge. Filing frivolous litigation, especially against a family member, is a serious matter. It wastes court resources and causes unnecessary pain. I'm dismissing this case with prejudice, meaning it cannot be refiled. The inheritance remains with Harper Collins as the deceased intended." She looked at my parents' lawyer. "I strongly suggest you advise your clients carefully before pursuing any further action in this matter." My parents' lawyer looked genuinely stunned. He'd clearly expected this to go differently. He gathered his papers quickly, avoiding eye contact. My mother whispered to my father, her voice carrying in the quiet courtroom, "I didn't know she'd done that. I didn't know she'd recorded everything." My father just shook his head, his face red. In that moment, sitting in that cold courtroom, listening to the judge's final ruling, I realized something beautiful. Grandma had protected me even after she was gone. She'd known me well enough to understand that I wouldn't defend myself properly, that I'd doubt myself, that I'd need her voice speaking on my behalf. She'd given me that gift. She'd made sure the truth would be heard even when she wasn't there to speak it herself. I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked me over. I felt loved in a way I'd never quite felt before. Not just loved, but defended, protected, chosen. Mr. Harlan reached over and squeezed my shoulder gently. "She was a remarkable woman," he said quietly. "She knew exactly what she was doing." I nodded, unable to speak, tears flowing freely now. The case was dismissed. The inheritance remained legally mine. Everything Grandma had wanted was now secured. My parents and brother gathered their things in silence. They wouldn't make eye contact as we left the courtroom. My mother walked past me like I wasn't even there. My father's jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. My brother glared at me once, then looked away. We walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight. It was a beautiful day, unseasonably warm for late November. I stood on the courthouse steps and just breathed for a minute. Mr. Harlan had to get back to his office, but before he left he told me, "Use it wisely. Use it the way she wanted you to, make her proud." "I will," I promised. That night my brother sent me a short text, just 4 words, "Guess you won." I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond with something cutting, something that would make him understand how much he'd hurt me. But I didn't. I deleted the message and moved on. I chose not to retaliate or gloat over what had happened. There was no satisfaction in their defeat, just sadness over what we could have been as a family and never were. Instead, I moved forward with my plans. I started looking for properties, small houses that could be converted into care homes. I researched licensing requirements, staffing needs, safety regulations. I worked with architects and contractors. I created business plans and financial projections. I poured everything into making this dream real. 6 months later, I purchased a beautiful old Victorian house on the outskirts of town. It needed work, but it had good bones, lots of light, a big kitchen, and enough space for 6 residents plus staff. I named it Margaret's Place, after Grandma. We renovated carefully, making sure everything was accessible and comfortable and warm. We painted the walls soft colors. We filled the rooms with comfortable furniture. We created a garden in the back where residents could sit in good weather. I hired a small staff of compassionate caregivers, people who understood that this work wasn't just a job. We opened our doors 8 months after the court case ended. Our first resident was an 82-year-old woman named Dorothy who'd outlived her entire family. She had nobody. She'd been in a facility where she was just a number, where nobody remembered her name. At Margaret's Place, she had her own room decorated with her things. She had caregivers who knew she liked her coffee with 2 sugars and that she'd been a school teacher for 40 years. She had a place where she mattered. Watching her settle in, watching her smile again, I knew this was what Grandma had wanted. This was why she'd chosen me. Being underestimated had given me a kind of strength I didn't know I had. It had taught me to rely on myself, to trust my own judgment, to keep going even when everyone around me said I was wrong. My parents never apologized. My brother never reached out except for that one text. Extended family members slowly started talking to me again once they realized I wasn't the villain they'd been told I was, but the relationships were never the same. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt, and I realized I was okay with that. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their recognition. I had Grandma's love, recorded and documented and legally protected. I had a purpose that got me up every morning. I had residents who depended on me, who trusted me, who told me I'd given them a reason to keep going. They tried to take what Grandma left me, but they couldn't take who she helped me become. They couldn't take the strength she'd given me. They couldn't take the belief she had in me. They couldn't erase the hours we spent together or the love we shared. They tried to rewrite history, but the truth was preserved on video, in medical records, in legal documents. The truth survived, and so did I. This story is about financial betrayal and what happens when family turns on you over money. But it's also about love and recognition and being seen by someone who truly understands you. If you've experienced something similar, if you've watched your family fight over inheritance, if you've been accused of manipulation when all you did was care, I want you to reflect on it and know you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below because someone else needs to hear it. Someone else needs to know they're not crazy, they're not wrong, they're not the villain. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish or greedy. It makes you strong. It makes you human. It makes you worthy of respect. Subscribe for more real stories about resilience and justice, about people who were underestimated and proved everyone wrong. Click that like button to help this story reach others who need it, who are sitting in courtrooms right now, who are reading legal documents accusing them of terrible things, who are wondering if they should just give up and give in. Being quiet doesn't mean being weak. I want you to remember that today and every day after. I want you to understand that kindness is strength, that showing up matters, that love leaves marks even after people are gone. Protect your boundaries and know your worth. Don't let anyone convince you that you're less than you are. Don't let anyone steal your story or rewrite your truth. Share this story with someone who feels overlooked or underestimated right now. Share it with someone who's been called too sensitive, too emotional too much. Share it with the caregivers and the quiet ones and the people who love without expecting anything in return. Thank you for being part of a community that uplifts people like us, that celebrates the helpers and the givers and the ones who stayed when everyone else left. Your voice matters. Your story matters. You matter even if they never clapped for you, especially if they never clapped for you. Keep going. Keep showing up. Keep loving. The right people will notice. And when they do, they'll make sure you're protected, just like Grandma protected me.